"Sir, keep your hands where I can see them." The words hit me just as red and blue lights washed across the sidewalk, turning every white fence and trimmed hedge in Westbridge Hills into a flickering police scene. I stopped beneath a maple tree 3 houses from my own front door, a brown grocery bag tucked against my hip and my daughter Emily's navy jacket folded over my arm. The evening smelled like cut grass, warm pavement, and the rotisserie chicken I'd picked up for dinner. Behind the 2 officers stood Catherine Whitmore, president of the Westbridge Hills HOA, holding her phone upright like she was recording the ending she'd already written for me. "That's him," she said. "That's the man I called about." I slowly placed the grocery bag on the sidewalk. A carton of eggs shifted inside. An orange slipped over the rim, hit the concrete, and rolled toward the curb. Nobody moved to pick it up. "I'm Daniel Brooks," I said. "I live at 418 Hawthorne Lane." Catherine gave a short laugh behind the officers. "He already told me that." I checked the resident directory. "There's no Daniel Brooks listed." She sounded pleased with herself. That was the strange part. Not nervous, not uncertain. Pleased. Like catching me walking home had somehow become the most important accomplishment of her week. Officer Ryan Miller stood about 8 feet away, one hand near his radio while his partner, Officer Luis Ortega, watched from beside the cruiser. Their body cameras showed small blinking red lights. Recording. Good. I could have ended the confusion in about 5 seconds. There was a small leather credential case inside my jacket pocket. My phone had been vibrating every few minutes with calls I had deliberately ignored. And if Miller had looked closely at my face instead of concentrating on the dispatch information in his earpiece, this entire scene might have changed immediately. But I didn't reach for anything. I kept my hands visible and listened. "Dispatch said suspicious person checking houses," Miller said. "We just need to figure out what happened." "I was walking home from Patterson's Market," I answered. Catherine stepped forward before he could ask another question. Her perfume carried through the cool air, sharp and floral. He was wandering around slowly and looking at properties. When I asked what he was doing here, he became evasive. I looked at her. "You asked who I worked for." Her mouth tightened. "Because you clearly weren't familiar to me." There it was. Not what I had done. Not where I had trespassed. Not what I had taken. I simply wasn't familiar to Catherine Whitmore, and in her mind that was enough to turn a father carrying dinner home into a police matter. Porch lights were coming on around us now. Curtains moved. A garage door stopped halfway up as someone watched from underneath it. Catherine lifted her phone a little higher. She wanted witnesses. She wanted proof that she had protected Westbridge Hills from someone she believed didn't belong there. 20 minutes earlier, none of that existed. No patrol cars. No flashing lights. No neighbors watching from behind curtains. Just me walking out of Patterson's Market with dinner tucked under one arm, while the automatic doors whispered shut behind me. It was early October, one of those evenings when the air finally loses the weight of summer, and every porch in the neighborhood smells faintly like leaves, charcoal, or somebody's dinner. I had driven past Patterson's twice since moving to Westbridge Hills, but that evening I walked because my personal vehicle was still being delivered from our old place nearly 200 miles away. The house itself had been ours for 6 days. Cardboard boxes still occupied half the living room. Emily had already claimed the upstairs bedroom overlooking the maple trees, and somewhere inside those boxes was probably the charger for the coffee maker I desperately needed. Moving at 43 feels different than moving at 23. Every box reminds you how much life you have accumulated and how little of it actually matters. Emily mattered. That was why I had chosen Westbridge Hills. Quiet streets. Good schools. Sidewalks wide enough for bicycles. A backyard where my 12-year-old daughter could sit beneath an oak tree and read without hearing traffic every 30 seconds. After years of unpredictable hours, missed dinners, and phones ringing at midnight, I wanted home to feel like home. My career had taught me that peace was rarely accidental. Somebody maintained it. Somebody paid attention. But there is a difference between protecting a community and believing you own everyone inside it. I had not learned that difference from a textbook. I had learned it over 22 years in law enforcement, beginning as a patrol officer who spent freezing winter nights directing traffic around stalled cars, and eventually working my way through investigations, command assignments, and department administration. Westbridge was supposed to be the beginning of something new. On Monday morning, I would walk into headquarters and officially take command as the city's new chief of police. Until then, I was just Daniel Brooks, a tired father carrying groceries home because his daughter had texted him 3 times about dinner. My phone buzzed again as I crossed Hawthorne Lane. Deputy Chief Miller. I looked at the screen and let it ring. He had already called twice about Monday's ceremony, and I had promised Emily that Friday night belonged to her. The phone disappeared back into my pocket. That was when I noticed the white Lexus. It passed me slowly, maybe 10 miles per hour, then continued another 100 feet before stopping beside the curb. I kept walking. The Lexus moved again, slow enough that I could hear its tires brushing over fallen leaves. At the next intersection, it stopped a second time. The driver was watching me through the side mirror. I recognized her before she lowered the window. Catherine Whitmore had introduced herself 2 days after we moved in, arriving at my front porch with a folder of HOA regulations thick enough to stop it. The first patrol car turned onto Hawthorne Lane before I reached the next driveway. No siren, just red and blue lights pulsing against the maple trunks and polished garage doors. A second cruiser followed 10 seconds later. Catherine stopped her Lexus at the curb and climbed out before either officer had fully parked. She moved quickly now, phone still raised, her confidence returning with every flash of emergency light. I stopped on the sidewalk. The grocery bag felt heavier against my hip. Officer Ryan Miller stepped from the first cruiser while Luis Ortega came around the second. I recognized both names immediately. Miller had been copied on several transition emails during the previous week. Ortega had attended the command briefing where my appointment had been announced internally, although we had never spoken face-to-face. Neither seemed to recognize me beneath the fading evening light. That was fine. I wanted them responding to the call, not to my title. "Sir, keep your hands where I can see them," Miller said. "Absolutely." I placed the grocery bag carefully on the sidewalk and laid Emily's jacket beside it. The paper crinkled under my fingers. Something shifted inside. An orange rolled out, bounced once, and traveled toward the gutter before stopping beside a storm drain. Catherine immediately stepped closer. "That is him." I told dispatch he was walking around looking into houses. Miller glanced toward her. "Ma'am, please stay back while we speak with him." Catherine stopped, but only barely. "I am the HOA President. I am the person who reported him. I understand. Please give us some room." Her mouth tightened. Ortega moved slightly to Miller's left. His body camera blinked red. Miller's did too. I kept my hands open and visible. "Your name, sir?" "Daniel Brooks." "Do you have identification?" "Yes. My wallet is in my right rear pocket." "All right. Do not reach for it yet." "Understood." Behind them, Catherine made an impatient sound. "He claims he lives at 418 Hawthorne, but he is not in our directory." Miller looked at me. "Is that your address?" "Yes." "How long have you lived there?" 6 days. Catherine cut in again. "That does not explain why he was wandering through the neighborhood." I turned my head toward her. "I walked from Patterson's Market." I nodded at the groceries on the sidewalk. "That is about 3/4 of a mile from here." Miller followed my glance. "Bread, milk, a carton of eggs, rotisserie chicken. Nothing mysterious." "Did you enter anyone else's yard?" he asked. "No." "Approach any doors?" "No." "Look through any windows?" "No." Catherine raised her voice. "He was watching houses." Miller looked back at her. "Did you personally see him enter private property?" Silence. A porch light clicked on across the street. "Not exactly," she said. "Did you see him attempt to open a door, gate, vehicle, or mailbox?" "No, but that is not the point." Miller's expression changed slightly. "What is the point, ma'am?" Catherine folded one arm across herself while keeping the phone aimed at us. "The point is that I know this community. I know who belongs here." The words hung in the cool air. Even Ortega looked at her now. I could hear the faint hiss of a lawn sprinkler behind me and the low crackle of Miller's radio. Catherine seemed to realize she had gone too far because she immediately started adding details. She claimed I had been moving unusually slowly. She said I had avoided answering questions. Then she suggested the jacket beside my groceries might not belong to me. Emily's jacket, the one with her school mascot stitched across the chest. I looked at Miller. "Officer, I would like your body camera to continue recording." He gave a small nod. "It stays on during the call." "Good." Catherine lowered her phone by half an inch. That was the first moment all evening when she looked uncertain. I knew something she did not. Every new sentence she offered was no longer helping her story. It was preserving it. Miller let the silence sit for a moment, and I respected him for that. Good officers learn early that silence makes people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people often start filling empty space with information nobody asked for. Catherine did exactly that. I am not saying he definitely stole anything, she said, lowering her phone another inch. I am saying we have a responsibility to protect property values and residents. Ortega glanced at the jacket beside my groceries. You told dispatch the individual might be carrying property taken from a residence. Catherine blinked. I said it was possible. What property? The jacket, for one thing. I looked down at the navy fabric. Emily's school mascot was embroidered across the chest in bright gold thread, along with her first name. Miller noticed it too. Whose jacket is that? Mr. Brooks? My daughter's. Emily forgot it in my office earlier today. Catherine immediately jumped on the word office. What office? I looked at her, but did not answer. My phone vibrated again inside my coat. This time the sound was loud enough for Miller to hear. Do you need to get that? He asked. It can wait. Catherine gave a thin smile. If he has identification, why are we standing here? Make him show it. Miller turned toward her. Ma'am, I will handle the contact. The smile vanished. I could almost hear Catherine recalculating. This was not unfolding the way she had imagined when she made the call. There was no dramatic discovery. No frightened stranger trying to escape. Just groceries cooling on the sidewalk and two officers asking increasingly specific questions about increasingly vague accusations. Miller looked back at me. Mr. Brooks, I am going to have you retrieve your identification slowly. Understood. I paused. My wallet was in my right rear pocket, but my department credentials were inside the leather case in my jacket. Reaching for the wrong one would end the mystery instantly. I moved carefully, took out my wallet, and handed Miller my driver's license. He read the address, then looked toward the houses. 418 Hawthorne. Correct. Catherine stepped forward. That address changed ownership recently. The directory still shows the previous family. Miller looked at her. So you knew the property had been sold? She hesitated. I knew there had been a transaction, but you did not know who purchased it. That information had not been properly submitted to the association. I almost smiled. 6 days in the neighborhood, and apparently my existence depended on Catherine's spreadsheet catching up with county records. Miller handed my license to Ortega, who walked toward his cruiser to verify it. Catherine kept recording. He was still acting suspiciously, she insisted. How? Miller asked. He would not tell me why he was here. He says he told you he lived here. Anyone can say that. Did you ask for his name? Catherine stopped. I asked what he was doing. Did you ask his name? Miller repeated. The sprinkler. Across the street clicked 3 times. No. Did you ask which house was his before calling? Not initially. Did he threaten you? No. Did he refuse to leave someone else's property? No. Each answer stripped another layer off her story. Ortega returned from the cruiser, holding my license. His expression was different now. Not alarmed. Recognition. He looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were matching my face to a photograph he had seen somewhere else. I knew exactly which photograph. The department had circulated my appointment announcement that morning. Ortega took one slow step toward Miller. Ryan, he said quietly. Miller turned. Ortega handed him my license and leaned close enough to murmur something I could not hear. Miller looked down at the name again. Daniel Brooks. Then his eyes came up to my face. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. Behind him, Catherine lifted her phone again, sensing something was happening but completely misunderstanding what it was. Miller stared at me for one long second. Sir, he said, his voice suddenly careful. Are you Chief Brooks? I nodded once. I am. Ortega straightened immediately. Miller did the same. Then both officers raised their hands in a crisp salute. The street went completely silent. Catherine's phone slowly dropped toward her side. For 3 seconds, nobody said anything. The only sound was the soft crackle of Miller's radio and the sprinkler ticking across the street. Catherine stared at the 2 officers as if they had suddenly started speaking another language. Her phone hung near her waist, camera still recording. Chief, she finally said. The word came out smaller than everything else she had said that evening. I returned the salute and nodded toward Miller and Ortega. At ease, gentlemen. Finish the call. Miller blinked. Chief, we can clear this immediately. No. I pointed toward his body camera. You were dispatched on a complaint. Handle it exactly the way you would have handled it 5 minutes ago. Catherine's face changed. Relief had flashed across it when she thought my position might end the encounter. Now that relief disappeared. Surely this is just a misunderstanding, she said. I looked at her. You called the police. Because I did not know who you were. That is exactly why the report needs to be completed. Miller gave a slow nod. Understood. He turned toward Catherine. Ma'am, I need you to clarify the information you provided to dispatch. Catherine shifted her weight. I already explained everything. You reported a suspicious person possibly checking residences and carrying property that might not belong to him. I said there were concerns. Whose concerns? Miller asked. She glanced toward the houses where neighbors were still watching. Community concerns. Did another resident contact you? Silence. No. Did another resident report seeing Mr. Brooks enter private property? No. Did you personally witness him commit any violation? Her fingers tightened around the phone. Not technically. That phrase landed harder than an accusation. Not technically. As though the absence of wrongdoing were a paperwork inconvenience. I crouched slowly and picked up Emily's jacket. The fabric smelled faintly like the strawberry shampoo she had used that morning. Dinner was getting cold. My daughter was waiting 3 houses away, probably wondering why a 10-minute grocery run had become 40. I could have used my title then. I could have told Catherine exactly what I thought about her version of neighborhood security. Instead, I picked up the grocery bag. Officer Miller, make sure the original dispatch audio is preserved with the incident record. Catherine looked at me sharply. Why would you need that? Because it documents what was reported before anyone arrived. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. Then the recording should support that. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ortega looked toward the curb. Chief, you're orange. I followed his gaze. It was still sitting beside the storm drain under the pulsing reflection of the cruiser lights. I walked over, picked it up, and brushed a little grit from the peel. When I turned back, Catherine had stopped recording. Do not turn that camera off on my account, I said. You wanted documentation. She stared at the dark screen. I think we have all made our point. No, I said quietly. We have established facts. Miller closed his notebook. Chief, your identification checks out, and there is no basis to detain you. You are free to go. Thank you. Then I looked at Catherine. You are free to go too. She seemed surprised. Maybe she expected punishment on the sidewalk. Maybe she expected me to use a badge the way she had tried to use an HOA title. I was not going to give her that excuse. As she walked toward her Lexus, Ortega stepped closer and lowered his voice. Chief, there is something you should know. I looked at him. His eyes followed Catherine across the street. This is not the first call from her about someone who supposedly did not belong here. The orange suddenly felt heavy in my hand. How many? Ortega paused. Enough that I remember the address. Catherine's Lexus pulled away beneath the maple trees. I watched its taillights disappear around the corner. The salute had embarrassed her. The body camera had documented her. But Ortega had just told me something far more important. This was no longer about what happened to me. Emily was standing on our front porch when I reached the house, arms folded against the evening chill. The porch light caught the worry in her face before she tried to hide it. Dad, why were there police cars down the street? I set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. The rotisserie chicken was barely warm now. A neighbor got confused about who I was. Emily looked at me for a second. The woman with the giant rule book? I almost smiled. That woman. She pulled 2 plates from a cardboard box marked kitchen and wisely left the rest alone. I did the same. Friday night still belonged to my daughter. The investigation did not belong to me anyway. That mattered. By Monday morning, after the ceremony at headquarters and the photographs and handshakes were finished, I requested a formal review of Friday's incident and immediately removed myself from it. I was both the police chief and the person named in the complaint. Those roles could not be allowed to contaminate each other. Deputy Chief Samuel Miller assigned the review through the department's professional standards process, with the relevant records preserved exactly as they had been created. Dispatch audio, body camera footage, written reports, call history, no favors, no shortcuts, just records. 3 days later, Samuel walked into my office carrying a thin gray folder that became considerably less thin over the next week. You should see this, he said. I did not touch it at first. Is it part of my incident? Not exactly. He placed it on the desk. It is a pattern review connected to the same address and caller. The air conditioner hummed above us. Outside my office window, Traffic moved quietly along Jefferson Avenue. Samuel opened the folder. Catherine Whitmore's name appeared again. Then again. Then again. Complaints about a delivery driver waiting too long at the curb. A contractor photographing a roof before an estimate. A college student visiting relatives on Birch Court. A home health aide who had parked in front of the wrong mailbox while checking an address. Some calls had ended before officers arrived. Others had produced brief contacts and nothing more. None, by themselves, looked dramatic. Together, they looked different. How far back? I asked. At least 18 months in the records we reviewed. I leaned back. The leather chair creaked beneath me. Keep me outside the investigation. Samuel nodded. Already done. Then another layer surfaced, this time from Westbridge Hills itself. Once residents learned that Friday's encounter had been documented, people began contacting the HOA board. Not me. The board. Emails were forwarded. Security notices were produced. Residents described being photographed, followed by Catherine's Lexus, questioned about guests, and warned that unfamiliar visitors could be reported as suspicious. One homeowner, Thomas Reed, had saved an email from Catherine instructing residents to report people who appeared to be out of place. Those words sat on the printed page with nowhere to hide. I remembered her voice on Hawthorne Lane. I know who belongs here. The same idea, dressed in different language. By the following Thursday, the HOA board announced an independent review of Catherine's conduct. She responded with a neighborhood email insisting she had always acted for safety. That email created another problem for her. Residents started comparing stories. Mrs. Alvarez from Cedar Court had one. The Reed family had another. A contractor named Marcus Bell had saved photographs and timestamps from an encounter 6 months earlier. The evidence did not arrive like thunder. It arrived like rain. One drop, then another, then enough that nobody could pretend the pavement was dry. I sat in my office late that evening listening to the soft buzz of fluorescent lights when Samuel called. The HOA scheduled an emergency meeting for Tuesday. That is their business, I said. Normally, yes. He paused. But they are playing the dispatch recording. I looked toward the dark window and saw my own reflection staring back. Catherine had wanted documentation. Now the entire neighborhood was about to hear exactly what she had documented. The Westbridge Hills clubhouse had seating for 60 people. By 7 o'clock Tuesday evening, more than 90 had squeezed inside. Folding chairs filled the aisles. People stood along the back wall holding printed emails, violation notices, and folders thick with records. The room smelled like coffee, copier paper, and the lemon cleaner someone had used on the tile floor an hour earlier. I took a seat near the back. No uniform, no badge displayed, just a gray jacket and the same calm I had carried down Hawthorne Lane. Catherine sat at the front table beneath the Westbridge Hills seal, wearing a cream blazer and the expression of someone determined to turn a disaster into a misunderstanding. Before we begin, she said, tapping the microphone, I want everyone to understand that every action I have taken has been motivated by community safety. A few people shifted in their chairs. Nobody applauded. Board Vice President Robert Hayes adjusted his glasses. Catherine, the independent review has raised concerns about repeated complaints involving residents, guests, workers, and service providers. Concerns are not proof of wrongdoing. That is why we are reviewing the records. Catherine glanced toward me. I assume Chief Brooks being here has something to do with this spectacle. I stayed seated. I am here as a homeowner. That answer seemed to irritate her more than an accusation would have. Robert turned toward a small speaker on the table. We are going to play the dispatch recording from the incident on Hawthorne Lane. Catherine's fingers stopped moving. A click sounded through the room. Then her own voice filled the clubhouse. Calm. Controlled. Certain. She described an unfamiliar man walking slowly through the neighborhood. She said I was watching houses. She said I claimed to live there, but was not listed in the HOA directory. Then came the sentence that changed the room. I know the residents here, and this man does not belong in Westbridge Hills. Nobody moved. Catherine stared at the table. Robert stopped the recording. Did you have evidence that Mr. Brooks had committed an offense? I had concerns. That was not the question. Her jaw tightened. No, a man near the aisle stood. Thomas Reed. He held up a printed email. You used almost the same language when my nephew visited last Christmas. Mrs. Alvarez rose next. She described Catherine photographing her home health aide's car and demanding identification from the woman in her driveway. Then Marcus Bell, the roofing contractor, spoke from the back wall. He had timestamps showing Catherine followed his truck for nearly half a mile while he was working on Cedar Court. One story became three. Three became seven. The sound in the room changed from whispers to pages turning. Catherine tried to interrupt. Robert raised a hand. Everyone will have time to speak. Then the emails appeared. Community alerts. Security reminders. Instructions encouraging residents to report people Catherine considered out of place. Her own words, printed in black ink. No interpretation required. No speech from me required either. That was the part Catherine seemed unable to understand. She kept looking toward the back of the room, waiting for me to attack so she could claim retaliation. I never gave her the opportunity. Near the end of the meeting, Robert read the independent review findings. The board had concluded that Catherine repeatedly exceeded her authority, misrepresented HOA procedures, and created unofficial security practices that had never been approved by homeowners. Effective immediately, she was removed as HOA President pending a full board election. The room went quiet again. Catherine slowly removed the small brass President nameplate from in front of her and placed it on the table. No shouting, no dramatic exit, just the soft metallic click of authority ending. As people began gathering their papers, Catherine walked toward me. "You got what you wanted," she said quietly. I looked at the folders stacked across the room. No, they got what they deserved. She glanced around at the neighbors she had spent years trying to manage. "And what is that?" I picked up my coat. A voice. Then I walked past her toward the door, leaving her beneath the fluorescent lights with nothing left to argue against except the record she had created herself. 3 weeks later, Emily and I walked home from Patterson's Market on a cool Friday evening. Same route, same maple trees, same stretch of sidewalk where Catherine had decided I needed permission to exist. This time, Emily carried the grocery bag, while I carried 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. Fallen leaves scraped across the pavement in the breeze, and somewhere behind the houses a lawn mower gave one last tired growl before shutting down. Westbridge Hills felt different now. Not perfect. Communities never are. But quieter in the right way. The HOA had elected Robert Hayes as interim president and suspended the unofficial neighborhood security program Catherine had created. New rules required complaints to describe specific behavior instead of vague labels like suspicious or out of place. The board also created a formal process for residents to challenge notices without having to argue with whoever happened to hold the gavel. Catherine still lived in the neighborhood. I saw her white Lexus occasionally. She no longer followed delivery trucks. She no longer photographed people walking past her house. When we crossed paths, she usually looked somewhere else. I was fine with that. Justice did not require humiliation. It required correction. At the department, the review of my encounter had closed without disciplinary findings against Miller or Ortega. They had responded to the information dispatch gave them, kept their cameras running, asked questions, verified facts, and adjusted when those facts changed. I made sure that lesson became part of our next command meeting. A badge does not make assumptions disappear. Training does not make people perfect. What matters is whether procedure gives truth enough room to surface. Emily bumped my elbow. "Was it right here?" she asked. "What?" "Where you dropped the groceries." I looked toward the curb. "About here." She grinned. "And the orange escaped?" The orange made a tactical withdrawal. She laughed, and for the first time I could laugh about it too. We kept walking until I noticed something flattened near the storm drain. Brown, dried, almost blended into the leaves. I stopped. Emily followed my eyes. "No way. The orange. Or what was left of it." 3 weeks of weather and passing tires had reduced it to a dark circle against the pavement. Emily stared at me. "You seriously left it there?" "I picked it up that night. Must have rolled out of the bag again while I was walking home." She shook her head. "Great police work, Chief. Everybody misses evidence occasionally." She laughed again. Headlights approached behind us. A patrol cruiser rolled down Hawthorne Lane at about 20 miles per hour. Miller was driving. Ortega sat beside him. They recognized me immediately. This time there were no emergency lights, no radios crackling, no questions. Miller gave me a simple nod through the windshield. I returned it. Emily waited until the cruiser passed. "Why did you not tell that woman who you were right away?" I took a sip of hot chocolate. Cinnamon and steam warmed the cold air. I had thought about that question more than once. Because my job should not determine whether someone treats me with dignity. Emily grew quiet. And because if I had shown her the badge immediately, She might have changed her behavior for the wrong reason. Because you were important? Because she thought I was important. We reached our driveway. The porch light was already on, casting a warm yellow circle across the steps. I looked back once at Hawthorne Lane. Catherine had believed authority meant deciding who belonged, who could speak, and who had to prove themselves. 22 years in law enforcement had taught me something very different. Real authority is not permission to stand above people. It is a responsibility to stand accountable beside them. I followed Emily toward the house as the smell of dinner drifted from the grocery bag. The street behind us stayed quiet. No flashing lights. No cameras. No accusations. Just neighbors going home. And that was all I had wanted from the beginning. So tell me this. If you had been standing on that sidewalk in my place, would you have revealed the badge immediately? Or would you have stayed quiet and let the body cameras capture exactly how Catherine treated someone she believed had no authority? I still think about that question because the title changed her behavior in seconds, but the recordings showed who she had been before she knew the title. Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where an HOA pushes too far and its own words expose the truth, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because sometimes the strongest response is not raising your voice, flashing a badge, or demanding respect. Sometimes it is staying calm, preserving the evidence, and giving the truth enough time to speak for itself.